Hello, everyone. This is Kelly Snyder with Valerie Graham with Findme, Police, Psychics, and More, produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for Hear Women Talk. Today's guest is Daz Smith, and we're talking to him from the United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Daz.
Good evening. It's good to be here.
We're glad you are.
Yeah, very much so. Daz, the topic today is remote viewing, and we have you on the show because we know you're one of the experts out there. And one of the first questions that comes to mind, obviously, for not only myself, even though I've been around it now for 8 years, is what is remote viewing in 5,000 words or less, and where did you learn how to do remote viewing?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question to start with. I mean, the official answer to that is something along the lines of remote viewing is a skill by which a person, which we call a viewer, can perceive objects, persons, events, or locations removed from them by time and space.
Well, now expand on that if you would, and try to, put us in a position as to how you started. I mean, are you sitting in a room where everything is dark? I mean, can you be looking out the window and do this? I know that, you always have a pad of paper in front of you because you're getting symbols and words and this and that. So if you could go into that a little bit, please.
Yeah, sure. Remote viewing is in essence a combination of all the kind of like time-honored classical psychic techniques, like clairaudience, clairvoyance, and channeling, that type of thing. And what we do as a remote viewer is we use those basic classical skills, but we use them within what we call protocols, which are essentially rules. We have 4 or 5 rules that we have to run our remote viewing through, and that's the only differentiation really from the old way of doing psychic behavior.
But within those rules, now you basically don't want to know any kind of front loading. You don't want to have a ton of information up front. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The main rule, because remote viewing it was invented in a scientific lab, in a lab called SRI, which is Stanford Research Institute, in the 1970s for the military. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to know that the psychic that was giving the information across, that the information they were giving was clean. So the way to do this is to always keep the psychic or remote viewer blind to the target. So as a remote viewer, we know nothing about the target up front, and we're not allowed to have anyone in the vicinity of us who knows anything about the target either.
And that's just so that you're not picking up the energy and the information from someone that's near you. Is that accurate? Yes,
and also from body language, because in a normal day-to-day conversation face-to-face with a person, 90% of the communication is actually through body language and not through actual talking. So it's to make...
Let's run through a case where you've been in the Findme group for, I think, about 4 years now, 3 years minimum, and when I send out an assignment to you, especially in the last year and a half, we've been sending it out to all of the remote viewers, an assignment, and you don't know whether it's a missing person case, you don't know if it's male, female, child, you don't know if it's a homicide and we're looking for the suspect. And the reason we created this is basically the controlled remote viewers don't want to have any information, and a lot of them, quite frankly, use their spouse or significant other, someone to review the computer on assignment so they're not getting anything. And what's the reasoning behind that as far as not having the front loading?
That's essentially to keep us blind as remote viewers, because we have to run by these rules. We have to be blind to the target and not know anything up front. And also, part of the process that we learn as remote viewers over the years, we find that if we are given little pieces of information up front, it generally actually causes us to be less accurate. I know that sounds strange, but it seems to be the case.
You're less subjective. Are you influenced by what you might know or hear about the subject then?
Yes. If we're told a little piece of information up front, it almost salivates the mind and gets the imagination running away with itself, and the biggest thing within remote viewing is we try to keep the imagination at bay as much as possible.
So how did the military figure out who they want to bring into this situation? I mean, is there some kind of a form you filled out and all of a sudden they picked something off the form that told them you were psychic or you had this ability? Explain that if you would.
Well, essentially that is how they actually chose their original military remote viewers that they used in the Stargate program. I myself, though, just met some of the ex-CIA military guys online way back in the early 90s, and took it from there. Really got talking to one of them who said he was coming to London, and he then took me through a 2-week training course in a technique called CRV, which is short for controlled remote viewing, and that is the method that was developed by the lab SRI for the military, and the military went on to use for 20 years. So
where did you have to do the training? Are you allowed to, speak of that? What was that all about?
I took my training at a college in London, which is about 100 miles from where I'm currently located, and it went on for a couple of weeks. It's quite intense. Anyone that ever wants to get into controlled remote viewing, it's a technique that was developed by a famous psychic artist from New York called Ingo Swann. And it's a technique that is very heavy in words and drilling. So there's lots of continual drilling, there's lots of lectures, there's lots of note writing.
And then from this course from Ingo Swann, then how did you branch off into, is it different between a military scenario versus outside looking for a missing person? Is there any kind of a difference in how you perform your technique?
No, the good thing about CRV is we try to keep to the procedures that were laid down in the early 70s and beyond as much as possible. So how they tried to look for spies and so on way back then in the heights of the Cold War is
right.
Almost like the same techniques that I try to use now. Although it's looking for missing people is slightly harder, because at the end of giving my information to you or someone else, the feedback that you get back to check the accuracy against is quite a bit less.
You had mentioned, we had talked a little before the show about the movie that so many have seen, The Men Who Look at Goats, and which was a Cold War type of remote viewing experiment as well. And you said that you were very familiar with that and actually had some insight.
Yeah, it's a great film, a great comedy, and it does give a semi-realistic picture of some of the early days of the experiments that went on. They did try to affect the heart of the goat, or so it's alleged. Some of the soldiers do talk about this and discuss this, and it was from a concept by a young man at the time called Jim Channon, who made up this concept called the First Earth Battalion, which is featured quite heavily in the film, about how they were trying to make Jedi-like soldiers, like the Jedis from the Star Wars movies.
Yes. Only your mind was the sword, right? Yes. It was based quite heavily around techniques in neuro-linguistic programming and meditation. A lot of, techniques like that. Well, we do
explain if you... I was just going to ask you to explain that a little bit, so that we can understand what that actually means.
Which part? Sorry, the neuro-linguistic programming, or
that hard thing to say.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't follow the NLP stuff much. I'm more into the meditation side of things.
Okay, but that was the technique that we're talking about with the men who stare at goats.
Yes, essentially they tried to create the ultimate soldier, a soldier that could, meditate and go into themselves and move into an altered state, so that they could almost be invisible when they tried to sneak up on people, and they could hone their minds to pick up intuitive detail about targets, to kind of like predict where an enemy would move around them, that kind of thing.
Was the idea behind that where the individual that was doing it was actually in the field of battle?
Yes. It was at the time, and we're talking, I think from 79 to 84 that they played around with those techniques. They were quite seriously and quite heavily going to put these people out into the field of combat. In fact, most of the people that were trained in that, and the actual project, it was named Project Jedi. The actual people trained in that were mainly special forces.
Oh, wow. I mean, this is just not something that everyone out there in the public, hears about. One of the things I was going to say, too, is we have a telephone number that our listeners can call if they have any questions for Daz today. It's 914-338-1186, 914-338-1186, and
Kelly,
also the chat line. Yes.
We have someone who has called in, Darlene,
great.
and she wants to speak with us. And again, the number for others.
Hi.
There we are, Darlene. Hi, Darlene.
Hi.
Do you have a question for us, Darlene?
Yes. I don't know how much details you want me to give over the line, but my son was found in 2004 on March 13th dead, and he didn't have his phone on him. He didn't have his glasses on him. He had a gold chain with the number 8 missing, and he was last seen out with 5 couples that night, left his girlfriend's house about 2, was found dead probably 8 miles from her house and less than 10 minutes from our house, almost 24 hours later.
So what's your question, Darlene?
Well, the girlfriend didn't talk to the police for 3 weeks, and it's not like him. He couldn't see without his glasses. My thing is, I just need some closure to this whole thing.
Well, what I'd like to do, if you got your Crayola handy, is give you our website, www.findme2.com. It's www.findme2.com, and send me the information surrounding his situation, and that way I can address it one-on-one with you. And certainly appreciate you calling in, and we'll try to help you out. Thanks, Darlene.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Not a problem. That's what we do every day. So anyway, Daz.
I will email you.
Okay, very good, Darlene. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Daz, I thought maybe that would be for you. But anyway, I wanted to finish by saying that we have a chat line, and if people will go to hearwomentalk.com,
we're looking at
on the chat line and see if anything that you're saying raises a question in their mind. But I wanted to go back a little bit, Daz, and in the psychic, portion of the controlled remote viewing, does any particular skill, like the clairvoyant, clairsentient, being involved in channeling, or is there any particular skill level that doesn't necessarily need to be there, or what are the ones that actually